Energy Matters podcast. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I am your host Qasim Alokla from Texas A&M University, Society of Petroleum Engineers Student Chapter, TAMO SPE. The aim of this podcast is to discuss and explore some specific topics about the energy industry in general and the oil and gas in specific, while covering some related topics in environment, economics, policy, and many more. Howdy, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Matters podcast. I'm Qasim, your host of today's episode on SPE and Beyond Insights on Leadership and Industry Impact with our distinguished guest speaker, Mr. Terry Palisch, the 2024 SPE International President and the Vice President of Technology and Engineering at CARBO. Thank you for accepting our invitation, Mr. Palisch.
It's good to be here, and howdy to you, and howdy to all the other Aggies out there.
Let me introduce our guest speaker. Terry Palisch is the Vice President of Technology and Engineering at CARBO Ceramics in Richardson, Texas, and he's currently the 2024 SPE President. He began his career with ARCO in Alaska and Algeria, joining CARBO in 2004, where he currently leads the research and development team. Palisch has been an active SPE member for over 40 years, serving in various roles, including past chairman of the SPE Dallas section, past chair of the SPE ATCE technical program, and the former SPE completion technical director. He is an SPE distinguished member and has received multiple SPE regional and international awards, including Distinguished Service. He has co-authored more than 50 SPE technical papers and holds several patents. Palisch holds a bachelor degree in petroleum engineering from the University of Missouri-Rolla, now the Missouri University of Science and Technology, where he has recognized as a distinguished alumnus. This is amazing. Thank you again. And now let's start with our questions. And specifically, let's focus more on your background and career. So first of all, can you share a bit about your journey from starting with ARCO in Alaska and Algeria to your current position as the Vice President of Engineering and Technology at CARBO?
Yeah, well, you said we have a short amount of time here, right, Qasim? So I have to be careful. That's 40 years you're talking about, but hey, look, it's great to be here. I'll apologize in advance. The allergies are really bad today, so
No
I'll
worries.
try not to sniff too much. But going back to your question, it's just been a really interesting career I've had. I grew up in St. Louis, and to school teachers, nobody knew what petroleum engineering. Heck, I didn't know what petroleum engineering was. I kind of chose it freshman year, and because I was going to do chemical engineering, and I wanted to have a job that kind of combined outdoor experience as well. So I said, well, let's do petroleum. It paid the most at the time, so why not? I'd never ridden on an airplane. I'd done any of that stuff. And my first job out of college was going to Alaska. And I'd had a classmate at Rolla who had gone up there the year before. And so that was kind of on the top of my list. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be so cool. So I went to Alaska, kind of started my adventure. Had no idea what was ahead of me, but it's been such an awesome career. But I did reservoir engineering to start. Then I actually, again, what did I want? I wanted a job that had outdoor experience, so they put me in reservoir to start, of course. So I did that for 3 years, but it was a good experience. I did some reservoir modeling, and then quickly made it over to more of the closer to the field. So I did what we called operations engineering, which was kind of like production engineering now. I did some shift work, 7 on, 7 off. It was great. Got to go see all kinds of things in Alaska on my days off, and did some exploration work, sat on the Alpine Discovery well. What else? Well, eventually I got into the frac side of the business, and ran the frac program. And that's kind of what really started my emphasis on hydraulic fracturing. So then I moved to Dallas. I transferred. We were up there 10 years. Transferred to Dallas. And I went to work in Dallas. We had the lab, which are a research center, and in the other half of the building was ARCO International. So that's where I went to work for ARCO Algeria, which was our Algerian company that we had with Sonatrach, and that was super cool. A lot of ex-ARCO Alaska people were there because they'd done shift work and had worked in the field. So I was working a job that was 28 days on, 28 days in the field, 28 days off. and then 28 days in the office in Dallas. So it was awesome. It was a three-way rotation. I was a production advisor, so I worked with the Sonatrach engineering manager, and we
Okay.
together kind of helped redevelop this field that ARCO had actually discovered 40 years before or 30 years before, and then had now come back as a redevelopment. What else? Then, I guess BP bought us in 2000. They offered me a job in London. They offered me a job in Houston, and they said I could just go to a straight 28. We had 3 kids by then, and I'm like, I don't want to do 28 and 28, and I don't want to move. So I left. I'd always thought about teaching. Ever since I left Alaska, I thought about going into teaching. My parents were teachers. So I used that opportunity to go and teach high school math.
Oh, wow.
So I taught high school math for 4 years. It was super cool. I mean, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Got to do a little bit of coaching and things, but every year the CEO of CARBO at the time would I was doing some consulting for them during the summers. And Mark would call me up every spring and say, "You ready to leave the teaching and come back to the industry?" And one year I finally said yes. And so actually I had worked with Mark Pearson in Alaska. So it was one of those, we'll probably talk about it later, but never burn a bridge. And always keep your contacts and your network up, and
For sure.
that's a perfect example. So I went to work for CARBO, and the cool thing was I got to teach again. So I got to teach people about technical things. And really what I did there, started out doing is a lot of technical sales support. So helping clients understand about proppant and connectivity. And it was a ton of travel. I mean, I was getting to see the world. It was so awesome. And then finally, in 2020, right after COVID, we did a little bit of reorganization, and they asked me to be vice president of R&D. So I still do that consulting work on the side with my technical support for the oil field, but then I also run our R&D. So
Okay. That's so cool.
that was, I could talk a long time about it. So.
Yeah. That's so cool. I like you started at Alaska, which is like so severe at the beginning of your career, but then you continued on that career path, and then you went to Algeria, and then after that to teaching, and got back again to the industry. This is so cool, and I really like the advice that you mentioned. Never burn connection. It's so important, especially in our industry. It's very small, so you never know. Like you might get back to the same company that you worked in like 10
Right.
years ago. So this is so
Exactly. You never know where that's going to come back. I mean, you just never know.
exactly, yeah. All right. So as you mentioned, you've been with CARBO since 2004. So could you please tell us more about CARBO, like about the company, what service you guys do, and also like what are some of the significant projects that you were involved in during your time at CARBO?
Sure. So CARBO Ceramics, we're an oilfield supply company. So we're on the hydraulic fracturing side of things. And so when you frack a well, you pump proppant. Most of what's pumped today is sand of some sort, natural occurring sand. But in many formations, you need strength, and you need higher performance, higher strength, more conductivity. And so that's where ceramic proppant comes into play. And so we're actually celebrating our 45th anniversary this year.
Wow.
And so I've been there about 20 years. When I came to CARBO, I'm going to say about 5 years before I came to CARBO, CARBO used to be all about just manufacturing ceramic proppant and salesmen who were selling it. And I'll call it a low tech sale. It was just, how deep is your well? How much strength do you need? And so when Mark Pearson came, he started introducing more technical sales. And then that's when he brought me in. And so I spent a lot of time early in my career at CARBO writing papers. You asked about some of the significant things. To me, I've written over 50 papers, but the ones that I really stand out to me were some of the first papers I wrote. So I wrote a paper on determining realistic connectivity, and it's been downloaded like over 2,000 times.
Wow.
I have another paper. It was basically in 2004, 5, 6 when we started slick water fracturing, and it was called Slick Water Fracturing Food for Thought. And it was just a bunch of things to be thinking about as you start thinking about slick water fracturing instead of conventional. And that's actually that paper's been downloaded over 6,000 times. It's been cited almost 200 times. Half of those, it was also peer reviewed. So that for me was super cool,
Mhm.
really fulfilling. And I've written some case histories and things like that. But as far as CARBO goes, we've kind of also morphed. So we've become more technology products. So now we do things like we have products that we can put scale inhibitor inside of a proppant grain and help prevent scale. I'd say one of our major breakthroughs was, I'm not sure, it's been probably 10 years. I guess it was, yeah, mid 2010s. We developed a product called Cryptosphere, which is a very advanced ceramic proppant, very strong, very smooth, very round. For use, it's got a lot of usage in the Gulf of Mexico. It's pretty much the proppant of choice in a deep water,
Mhm.
it's high stress environment. So that was pretty cool. I've been a part of that all this time. I had nothing to do with its development. I mean, there was way
Okay.
smarter people in the lab that figured it out. So the R&D team did that work. All I did was help to explain to people why it was useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so again, a lot of our technology products, we're starting to expand off into things like foundry media and grinding media, and now agriculture as well, with just
Mhm.
different things we can make at our plants. So we're about 60% oil field now. So about
Mhm.
40% of our revenues actually come from outside the oil field for some of these other products. So that's been, for me, when I went to, leading R&D, it really was an eye opener for me, or really a learning experience to learn about these other industries that aren't oil field related.
Yep.
But I got to apply my learnings and my background outside. So
Yeah, that's so good. Um, so directly after finishing your bachelor degree, you started directly working in the industry. But how do you think like your degree in petroleum engineering helped shape your career path, especially your education at the University of Missouri role?
yeah, I think about, I guess I'll just maybe two things. One would be the petroleum engineering side of it. Look, I had some really good professors, and I'm sure everyone has that one or two professors that they remember. But Dr. Cateritz, he was just a super guy. Professor Vaughn, both of them had worked in the field, one in engineering, one more in the field. And so that field experience that they gave to us was great. Missouri Rolla was a very small school. I mean, our class sizes were 10 and 20 people once we got into petroleum engineering.
Wow.
So everybody knew their professors very well. And so to me, I think that prepared me a lot. Dr. Cateritz had actually worked Alaska, so he helped me with that. And then I think the other thing, I'm sad to say I was an SP member as a student, but I didn't do anything. I mean, I basically I signed up so I could put on my resume,
Okay.
but I was if I hadn't been involved in my fraternity like I was, I think I would have been involved in SP. But I think there's a lot of same things. You
Mhm.
know, at my fraternity, I was elected as a treasurer and a vice president, and I did a lot of volunteer work. And I think that now that I think about it, kind of kicked off my probably,
Leadership skills.
yeah, my leadership skills, and what probably led me to really enjoy being involved in SPE
Yeah.
as a professional.
Yeah.
So I think those two things are really what probably did a lot of preparation.
All right, that's so good. Let's move to the next section of this discussion, which is mainly SPE, the Society of Petroleum Engineers, where you are currently serving as the president. All right, so as you mentioned, you've been active member of SPE since like for more than 40 years. Please tell us more on how did you first get involved with SPE? You mentioned that you were not an active member, like you were not
Right.
part of the SPE board, maybe at school or you're at the SPE chapter. But what was like your first involvement with SPE and how did it impact the preceding roles with
Yeah.
SPE?
So my first involvement was probably when I wrote an SP paper up in
Okay.
Alaska, because if you wanted to go to a conference, you had to write a paper. So we wrote a paper in 1994. A friend of mine, Andy Bond, we wrote a paper on a pressure gauge and got to go to a conference. And then I would go to section meetings every once in a while. But really, I would say when I really started getting involved was when I moved to Dallas.
Okay.
And two things kind of happened. One is I was asked by Carl Montgomery to serve as on like one of the awards committees, international awards committees, and then somehow or another that led to being on the program committee for ATCE, and I was
Mhm.
on that for like 10 years. Eventually, led that. So
Wow.
that was one big involvement for me, and then the other was kind of at the same time. I started going to Dallas section meetings more because as a CARBO person, you wanted to meet people, network and stuff. And so some people, David Hamilton, Brian Chaka, Danny Bell, Brad Robinson, they were there. I didn't really know them before, but they saw, it's like anything else. If you start coming to these meetings often enough, they start saying, hey, maybe this guy can help us. And
For
so
sure.
they asked me to run the program committee and then eventually the chair of the section. And look, you've probably heard me say this before. I've said this on, I think probably at A&M one time. Most of what I've done is because somebody asked me to do it. And I just have a hard time saying no. And I'm always glad I say yes, because you learn. That's how you get better at what you do. So that's kind of what launched me.
All right. I totally agree with this. Um, so talking about SPE, and since you are now the president, so why do you think SPE is such a successful organization when it comes to preparing its individuals, like especially like students and professionals, to be more engaged with the industry? So, based on your 40 years of experience with SPE, why do you think SPE is really like one of the top organizations, maybe, if you want to say?
Um, I think part of it is just there's just some really good people out there. Um, And I think the more people I meet, whether, before I was even president, as you're out meeting sections and students, and they're just people they really enjoy what they do and they're passionate. Um, and I think it's the thing I try to get across to people. And as I go out as president and talk about creating our energy future is, um, there's just so many opportunities to help yourself professionally,
Yep.
whether it's volunteering or it's like we said before, it's leadership opportunities, or maybe it's just working together as a team to put on an event that raises money for scholarships, or it's to go out in the community and give back. And I just think there's something for everybody
Mhm.
at SPE. And that, by the way, that doesn't even, of course, talk about all the technical side of it, right?
For
I
sure.
mean, all the
For sure.
technical resources, and now we have SP Live and the opportunity to stay up to speed with kind of the hot topics. And then, I mean, look, I would be remiss not to say that I think one of the reasons we're so successful is because of the SP staff themselves. I mean, we have some really good people that work at SPE permanently. And, I haven't met any that just aren't passionate. Again, they're passionate about it too. So I think that's probably why. And I mean, I think it's a good formula. The formula seems to work, but by the same token, we continue to look for ways to improve it.
Yep.
It's not perfect, but like I said, that passion is what I think. I think that's the thing that is most fun when I'm out talking to students, especially students, is they're all passionate and they're all excited, and that's fun. That's fun to be around.
Yeah, I totally agree. And especially on the part of the SPE staff, I really think that the SPE staff members are really professionals and they are very responding, especially when it comes like since like we are here like at Texas A&M like running the SPE chapter, our communication with the staff members is excellent. Like they are very responsive and they help us whenever needed. So this is like a question that just came to my mind. Since now you are the SPE president, at the same time you are running CARBO. So what's a typical day?
Oh my
Of
gosh.
like when you wake up in the morning, how can you manage uh, both roles?
Well, I'm working day and I'm working at night. I mean,
Mm.
I
Sure.
usually come in every Saturday for a little while, maybe um, for the year. So look, it's not a secret. For the year that you're president, I mean, obviously I'm incoming president for a year, then president, and then outgoing. The incoming and the outgoing is a little bit more manageable. It's more like being on the board as a regular board member. But the year you're president is just really nonstop. And I think the thing that surprised me more than anything else was, I knew that I'd have to run board meetings and I knew that I'd have to travel, and travels is ridiculous, but I'm always amazed at how much goes on just during the day, right? I mean, whether I'm talking to Simon, the CEO, or there's just emails coming through and whatever. And so, um, look, I can't. I'm not able to give 100% of my time to CARBO. I mean, and they know that, and my team has been awesome. They've been right. They understood it. The executive team, they understand. I mean, one thing that's kind of helped a little bit is just everybody's pretty okay with a virtual meeting.
Yes.
So I can, barring a really bad time change, I can usually get on a call, even if it's late at night, early in the morning. But they're long days, and yeah, it's pretty grueling, but I enjoy it. I mean,
Yes, for
again,
sure.
you just it's just fun, and if it wasn't fun, there's no way you would do it. So it's both probably the hardest I've ever worked, but it's also the most fun I've ever had. So yeah, I guess nothing's fun if it's not work. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I totally agree. And yeah, it's so cool. Like 2 weeks ago, maybe you were in Malaysia, or during the IPTC, right? It was in Malaysia, right?
OTC Asia was in Malaysia.
Yes.
IPTC was in Saudi.
Well, IPTC was in Saudi, and then you went to Canada. I mean, it's so cool, but at the same time, it's tiring. Like, I know.
It is, yeah, yeah, it is, but yeah. I mean, look, going back to something I said earlier, if I had sat down and said, "Oh, I don't think I can do that. There's no way I could do that. I mean, that's too much time, whatever," you wouldn't have done it. But
Exactly.
the fact that I mean, look, my wife kind of pushed me into it. She said, "Look, why don't you try to do this?" And look, I would have never done this if our kids were at home.
No.
And so we have board members that have young kids and stuff. And to me, they're the ones that I really recognize is that they're doing that and they're doing their family at the same time. That's pretty impressive. So at least my kids are grown, and I'm not dealing with that as well. So
Wow, that's so good. All right. Last question here when it comes to SPE. Since you are also heavily involved with all of the activities going on all over the world, I mean, you might not be directly involved with them, but I mean, you are familiar with everything that's going on. What are some of the initiatives or changes that you would like SPE to have, maybe like in the coming years, especially with what's happening now in the oil and gas industry?
yeah, you know, so look, my theme is creating our energy future, and that theme came. I didn't set out for that theme. That theme came as I think actually I think you guys were one of my first student sections that I came to, and I floated that creating our energy future out there. It's just was something I was thinking, and it turned into realizing that that's really what I wanted to impress. So my goal, what I really this year wanted to impress upon people was just the value of SP membership. A lot of times, and when I was on the board before, we would kind of think in terms of dollars and cents. So we would be thinking about, okay, well, you get 10 paper downloads and that's worth $80. And then if you go to a conference, that's worth another $200. I mean, and it seemed right at the time. I was a part of that. But as I started thinking about this, some of the things you and I have just been talking about, that's not the value you're getting from SPE. That's part of it, but that isn't why you sign up for SPE.
For sure.
And so I like to use the gym membership discussion, and I know you've heard that.
Yes.
And it's just again, you go to the gym for your physical well-being, and you don't think about, well, that gym costs me $120 a month or whatever, and am I getting my money's worth? You just sit there and say, well, am I using the equipment? Is it helping me become more physically fit? Whatever. And same thing, you need to think about your SP membership.
Mhm.
We all use different equipment at the gym. We do the same thing with SPE. I mean, for me, even throughout my career, SPE's given me different things, or I've done different things with SPE. And so it's how you help your professional development.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so the more you put into it, the more you get out. And so what I've been trying to do is I really want people to understand the value that you get for volunteering and for participating. And so, my podcast, of course, that we've tried to each month talk about something else that SP offers, because that's one thing I was surprising. I mean, when I came to SP, I was like, I had no idea I still learn things that I'm like, I had no idea we did this. And so I wanted people to really just understand what they could get. The other thing, though, I really hope that I don't know that we'll accomplish it this year, but hopefully we'll get started. One of the biggest questions I get, and it's something you asked, is how do we help what can SP do about our public image? And the thing that kind of always strikes me is, I mean, SPE can only do so much. I mean, we can, but what 127,000 members across the world can do can be pretty amazing.
For
So
sure.
where I think SPE can help is kind of arming and educating our members on the things that they need to understand so that they can go talk to their friends and their teachers and their kids' friends and things like that. So, we have the Energy for Me platform, and it's a great platform. It's really geared more towards going into schools and doing experiments and things like that. But I hope that sometime over the next year or two that we can, first of all, update that program, add some experiments, but also maybe expand that into just helping people understand, just the oil industry, and just so you have the talking points, and members can go out and talk to the people that they meet. So I'd say those are the two primary things that I'd like to try to do over the next year or two.
Yeah, I love the idea of the discussion with the public, like just having like some groups from SPE, and this can be also implemented at SPE chapters, student chapters.
Exactly.
As for example, we go here like during the freshman hiring season, we go to the freshman student, tell them about SPE. Also, the industry does, so that they can, for example, consider a career in oil and gas industry. But yeah, this is a really important point, especially now with what's happening with energy transitions and carbon sequestration. Some people might be, for example, against this idea. So, like
Right.
educating the public is very important. Thank
I
you.
think by and large, everybody is in agreement if they just have the facts. If
Yes.
they just kind of understand it. And granted, my facts, you're going to say, well, you're going to give certain facts. But I mean, I just think the thing is we just need to educate people.
Yeah.
So
All right. Perfect. Now let's switch gears to talk more about the oil and gas industry in general and the future of this industry. And just want to know your thoughts on the future of the oil and gas industry, especially with what's currently happening when it comes to energy transition, renewable energy, sustainability, reducing carbon emissions. Of course, the oil and gas industry already has all of the skill sets, has the resources to play a big role in contributing to reducing emissions. But what's your perspective on the future of the oil and gas industry with all of the challenges that it's facing right now?
right. Well, look, one thing we have to understand is energy demand, just energy demand is going to continue to grow. I mean, we could sit and look at charts all day long and I show them where we continue to grow and grow and grow our energy demand. And we haven't, I mean, China is just now starting to grow. India is behind China. Sub-Saharan Africa is even way behind that. I mean, population is going to grow another 25% by 2050. I mean, our energy demand is going to continue to grow. And the energy that you need is going to need to be affordable, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be green or
Yeah.
decarbonized. And so right now, I think the oil and gas industry is, first of all, going to be around a long time. I mean, do you know that the United States, the Energy Information Administration, excuse me, EIA, has a projection out through 2050, and they're showing flat oil production
Wow.
in the US, so 14 million barrels a day from now to 2050.
Yep.
What's scary about that? 70% of that production is coming from shale.
Yes.
So, Qasim, what's the decline rate on a shale in the first 2 years? It's like 80%, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if we're going to stay flat, how many wells do we have to drill to stay flat? And by the way, we're not drilling core areas anymore and things like that. So we need people and technologies to continue to meet those demands. So
Sure.
look, what I've seen, the best projections, the ones that I believe the most, show that in 2050, 2060, right now right now about 80% of the energy comes from oil, gas, and coal, fossil fuels.
Yes.
And what I'm seeing on probably the most realistic projections, at about 50% of the energy mix will be oil and gas.
Sure. A minimum. Yeah.
Now you say, well, that's a drop. But
Mhm.
you know what? It's not. It's actually flat. What's
Yeah.
happening is renewables are growing fast, but they're basically providing the upside.
Yes.
But you still need the base load. And so I think the oil and gas industry has a lot of running room. I mean, we could look at examples of things that are going on in Europe and stuff where they're starting to explore. I mean, we have a long way to go. And I think that our industry, you mentioned them before. I mean, we didn't even start talking about geothermal or carbon capture and all the things that are in our wheelhouse. So if my son or daughter was just starting out in school and wanted to go into petroleum engineering, I'd be all about saying yes, because
Yes,
we need the best and the brightest, and you could be it. So
that's so
I
good.
think we have a long way to go.
Yes, that's so good and so promising, especially with an expert like you. Um, as someone who's deeply involved in research and development, what emerging technologies or trends you see? Well, I think we already mentioned them, but yeah, what emerging technologies you see will shape the future of the oil and gas industry?
Well, okay, look, obviously, the obvious answer to one of these is going to be AI, right? And data science.
Yeah.
But I think our industry, just like the rest of the world, is still trying to figure out how is artificial intelligence going to help us.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of we don't begin to figure out all that stuff. Whether it's, it's going to be required to help us automate. It's going to, I mean, I think what that's going to do for us is it's going to make engineers be way more efficient and be able to make way better decisions and work and do more work. I mean, just in the 40 years I've been in it, I mean, a production or a petroleum engineer has access to so much more data and so many more things that they can do than models that we didn't have before, and it makes us more efficient, and it helps us develop things. But honestly, as much as I'm sure AI is a big deal, um, I think the biggest question is going to be, how are we going to continue to increase recovery?
Mhm.
Um, not just from our conventionals, and most, in a lot of conventionals, I mean, we're in secondary and tertiary recovery and EOR, and I mean, if you can get another 2 or 3% out of these, that's a big deal. And I think we have a lot of work to be done there. But our unconventionals, I mean, we have what, 10% recovery at the most. I mean, we don't have to
Yeah.
explore for that oil. It's just sitting there. We just got to figure out how to get out of the ground.
Yes.
And then, by the way, then there's heavy oil. And there's deeper water that we could be drilling in. And there's, so to me, it's all of those. I want to know what's going to be the next horizontal wells with multi-stage hydraulic fracturing. What's going to be that breakthrough that we had in 2000?
Yes.
Because that was a complete game changer. I
Yes.
mean, I don't think people saw that coming. Oil, the U.S. was hugely relying on external imports, and now we're an exporter. The world has more gas than it knows what to do with. I mean, we have decades and probably centuries worth of gas available, and it's all because of shale. And we took something, horizontal wells we've been doing for 7 years, and hydraulic fracturing that we've been doing since the 40s, and we just put them together.
Yes.
I mean, I'm making that sound very trivial, but I
Yeah.
mean, the two big parts of this we did before, all we had to do was figure out how to put them together.
Yeah.
And crazy. It's crazy what it's done. So I want to know to me, those are the things that as engineers, as petroleum engineers, you can be excited about, because, there's going to be those types of breakthroughs, and it's going to completely change things again. So.
Wow, that's so good. And yeah, like we focus more on the oil and gas industry, but also like on this other side, we can mention that how the oil and gas industry will also help other industries, like geothermal, as you mentioned before, hydrogen production, also sequestration of the CO2, because all of these will also, as we can say, for example, improve the image of the industry from one side. On the other side, like reduce emissions. So, and AI, I totally agree on your point of view. Hopefully, soon we'll have like some more advancement in this industry, and this will drive more talents and passion into continuing our mission in the oil and gas industry.
Well, yeah, and custom, let me just kind of build on something you said before about geothermal and carbon
Mm.
capture and storage. You know, uh, look, what I like to tell petroleum engineers or students is that if you want to be the best petroleum engineer and figure out how to increase recovery or drill more efficient wells or what have you, come to our industry and do that. If you want to go ahead and help save the planet and you want to work that side of the business, come to our industry. I mean, let's figure out how to drill a geothermal well in a super hot rock when we can go ahead and provide tremendous amount of baseload energy. or come and be a reservoir engineer and help us figure out how we're going to store CO2 in these wells, or a completions engineer to figure out how you're going to recomplete the wells and make sure we don't have leakage. And we could say that about so many different things. And so there's a place for you. And when you talk to most companies, they're not necessarily trying to go out and hire people to do that work. They're taking their own employees and they're converting them, or they're helping them, an existing engineer, and helping them transform, because petroleum engineering has, we're grounded in so many of the base understandings that we can be adaptable to a lot of things. So
I couldn't agree more with this. Now let's move to another part of this podcast, and mainly to target the future petroleum engineers. And since from your position as the SPE president, so what advice would you offer to students currently pursuing petroleum engineering? You already mentioned, and you gave an example about your kids, if they are now going to college, and you will advise them to go to petroleum engineering. So, like, can you give us like some more elaboration at this point, especially for us students?
well, we've kind of touched on some of them, but let's just, first of all, the networking side of it. I mean, look, I think most students understand you go to school and you learn and you try to get the best grades. I mean, there's nothing more I can tell you about that. But there is way more to it than that. So being involved, whether it's SPE or it's other student organizations, learning to work together in the network, because you are not going to solve very many problems in the future without working together with somebody else. So being able to collaborate, and that's, again, to solve a problem. That's not just that, but then there's also the networking side of it. And like I said before with my career, I mean, I think this thing they normally say, your resume gets you your first job, but your network will get you every job after that.
For sure.
And that's true. So to me, that networking side, being able to look, as engineers, we're typically not the best communicators. We're typically not the best writers. We're not the best, but that doesn't mean we can't be. And so you kind of got to make an effort. That may not be you, but you make an effort and do that. And look, there's a place for everybody. The other thing, I'm going to talk about something too that maybe it's kind of a little bit off topic, but integrity and trustworthiness and things like that. Just some of these, I'll call them more moral skills. I just think they go a long way, and I think that a level of trust is really important, and having character and things like that will just serve you very well. And then the last thing we also touched on too is just this volunteering thing. When it's funny, my son actually said this back to me one day when I'd been saying it to him all his life, but when somebody asks you to do something, like lead this or do that, and you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't know if I can do that. Well, somebody thinks you can do that, or they would have never asked you to do it. So say yes. Yeah, get help, don't be afraid to ask for help. And we all want to be able to do things without the help, but there is absolutely nothing wrong with asking questions. And I think it makes you actually look better, because it's just like, look, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to get better. So that would be the other advice I'd kind of give. These are more soft skill advices, is the way I look at it.
Yes, I totally agree with this. Thank you for sharing these advice. How about young professionals or students who graduate from school and they are no more involved with SPE chapters? Of course, I know what's your recommendation. Join SPE section, right?
Well, let me tell you a story somebody told me the other day, and I hadn't ever thought of this, and I thought, what a great illustration. First of all, we have 200 sections across the world in 145 countries. So I don't care where you're working, there's going to be a section near you somewhere. So the reason I say join the local section is because, like we said before, that's when you can have the ability to network, you have the ability to collaborate, you get to work together on things, you get professional fulfillment. But what they told me was, which I thought was really interesting, was when they go to a new area, so you're going to transfer, and now I'm not working in Dallas anymore, now I'm working in Kuala Lumpur. And you go and you join the SP section, and you have instant family, you have instant network. You are instantly around people who understand what you're doing as a work. And so it's not just necessarily like I said, you all of a sudden have this network that you're not sitting there trying to find new people. You're, learn and get friends, whatever. So that's one of the things I'd never thought of. I'd never thought about how, that's a very portable thing. So I'd say that, we've covered all the other stuff. But it
Yeah.
is important. It's funny. It's something I hadn't thought of, but it is important to do it as soon as you're out. And you know what? In the beginning, maybe all you're doing is just going to a section meeting here and there, and meeting people, and continuing to learn the technical side. And then before you know it, maybe somebody asks you to do something, or maybe there's something that interests you. You depending on where you're at in your stage of life, you're going to get different things out of SPE.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Especially that you will go, for example, to a seminar where you have like other colleagues from different companies. You will build connections. You will maybe you will collaborate with these people on a paper or on a future SPA event. So it's really important. And as you mentioned, like when you started like publishing all of these papers, so it's really impressive, and it's really important for everyone to continue being involved with SPE even after graduation from their schools.
Custom, the other
Yeah,
thing, let me say one more thing too.
sure, sure.
We said the section, right?
Yeah.
And that's important, and that's a local thing. But also, I would say, as you probably don't want to do this right away, but maybe as you start to get more experience, start looking for international committees,
Mhm.
like the ATCE program committee, or
Sure.
maybe it's a whatever. It's really important, because then you'll start expanding that global network.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing to me when I was elected president, and I was at the ATCE there, and how many people came up to me and like, well, man, we worked together on this committee and whatever, and it's just crazy. So don't just think about the local section, but also think about the global section, or the
Yes.
global as well.
Yep. Yep. I totally agree. This is really important. All right. Moving to the final section here, and it's basically like a question related to education. So what significance do you place on continuing education, even like after graduating from school, after doing your master's, doing your PhD? There is always a need to continue educating yourself. Like it's a lifelong learning experience. So how can individuals, let's say, or petroleum engineers continue the education journey even after like finishing their actual, let's say,
Yeah,
education?
formal education.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Well, first of all, we all have to remember we don't know it all, and so technology now is changing very rapidly, and so what you're learning today in school will be different to some extent in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and there'll be so much more to it. So I would say, and I don't, I don't want to go back to SP every time, but I mean, that is one of its, it's just disseminate technical information. So, you know, I would, I was just reading JPT actually this morning, and there are some amazingly good articles in there, and it covers the whole gamut. It covers the energy transition, it covers oil and gas, it covers recovery. That's a really quick and easy way to be kind of digesting kind of the hottest topics and elite topics. Of course, we have workshops and conferences, but SP Live is another one of those where, again, it's quick hits, hot topics. Maybe listen to find some podcast people that you like to listen to. I've just only kind of begun to listen to podcasts. And now I tend to listen to them like when I'm exercising or writing or something like that, and it's just really amazing. It just gives you an opportunity to kind of digest, and
Yes.
so I like that. So congratulations to what you're doing here with this
Thank you.
with the podcasting. But yeah, it's super important to continue to learn. And some people ask me, well, should I get my MBA? Should I get my master's? All that stuff. I'd say everybody's different. Sometimes I have no advanced degrees. I do sometimes wish I had taken opportunity advantage. Most larger companies will pay for your, to do an MBA at night and things like that. And I kind of wish I'd done that. I mean, my oldest son did it right after he graduated. My wife did it as well. But I never did. So sometimes I kind of wish I had. So if that's, I will say this, it's way better to do that shortly after you're out of school than waiting a long time because
Yeah,
you're still in the learning mode.
yeah,
But that's, it just depends. It's not required.
for sure.
But if it is, some people do want to do that and talk to your company, especially if you have the opportunity to do it on their dime. But yeah, got a lifelong learning. That's you hit it. You said it right. I mean, lifelong learning. It's a journey, and you always have to be open to new things and adaptable. I think adapting. We didn't talk about this much, Kasim, but I'd like to tell everybody out there that they're never going to get laid off, that they're never going to lose their job and whatever, but it may happen. Or, maybe you don't lose your job. Maybe you just get bought by a different company and it's like we did. And then you have a job, but you don't want to work for that company. So you have to be able to adapt. And of
Or
course,
another
that's where your
COVID,
network. Yeah, what's that?
another COVID or something.
Yeah, you have to adapt. You have to be willing to, like I did. I mean, I changed my courses a couple of times, and so the network and all those things are all very important. Your network and all that sometimes is your insurance policy, right?
Yeah.
Maybe your fallback. So
Yes, yes, totally agree with this. All right. With this, we come to an end to our podcast. It was so quick because I really enjoyed every part of it, and I learned a lot from you, Mr. Palisch. It's always great to talk to you. We've met several times before, and hopefully we'll continue to meet in the future. On behalf of the Society of Petroleum Engineers at Texas A&M University, I would like to thank you for your time and invaluable collaboration in making this podcast a successful one. And I'm pretty sure all of our attendees are gonna enjoy it. I wish you all the best in continuing your contribution to the oil and gas industry and also for the rest of the year. I know that you will have a lot of events to be part of, a lot of flights. I know that tomorrow you are flying. So I know like it's a busy schedule, but I totally believe that it's going to be a rewarding experience, especially for someone like you with all of this technical background. The SPE leadership will add more to your career and also like will inspire others at the same time. So thank you so much for everything.
Well, I hope so. And you know what? Thank you to you. And I know you do a lot of work with the student chapter there. And congratulations to the student chapter, all the great things you do. I know when I first started my presidency, you guys were calling me up to come to the 10A and all the different things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys do all kinds of things. So you're a great inspiration to everybody. So keep up the great work to everybody. And gig 'em.
Thank you so much, Gigim. All right. Thank you for our listeners, and we'll see you on another podcast.